If your AI agent can move faster than your controls can verify it, you do not have automation. You have unmanaged risk with a nice demo. And that is exactly why so many AI agent projects look brilliant in week one, then become a governance problem by month two. So today I want to walk through the control review that every enterprise team should do before giving an AI agent real access to systems, to data, or workflows. Not after the pilot breaks, not after audit asks questions, before. Because the biggest mistake I keep seeing is this: teams treat agent deployment like a tooling decision, when in reality, it's a controlled design decision. An agent does not just generate output. It touches data, it triggers actions, changes records, escalates tickets, sends messages, and sometimes makes decisions that used to sit inside human judgment. So in this video, I'm going to break down the 5-part control review that I'd run before automating any business process with an agent. If you work in security, internal audit, GRC, enterprise architecture, or platform governance, this is the checklist that keeps speed from turning into exposure. So let's start with the real issue. Most teams look at an AI agent and ask, what can it do? That is the wrong first question. The first question is, what process are we handing over? What controls already exist inside that process? And which of those controls are about to disappear if we automate too quickly? Because every business workflow has invisible structure. There are approval steps, there are exception paths. There's tribal knowledge, there are escalation rules. There are moments when someone pauses because something feels off. And when a team rushes to automate without mapping those things, the agent does not remove complexity, it just hides it. That is why I always say audit before you automate. Before the agent touches workflow, you need to understand the workflow as it actually operates, not as the SOP says it operates. That means the real version. The messy version, the version with workarounds, undocumented exceptions, handoffs, and judgment calls. If you skip that step, the agent will faithfully accelerate a process that you never properly understood in the first place. And that is not transformation. That is faster control failure. So here is part one of the review. Map the real process end to end, not the idealized one, not the slide deck version, the real one. If you're automating ticket triage, map what happens when data is missing. If you're automating customer communications, map who approves unusual cases. If you're automating vendor intake, map where legal, security, and procurement actually step in. What you're looking for are 4 things, right? First, decision points. Where does a human currently apply judgment? Next is exception paths. What happens when the normal path breaks? Third is control points. Where do approvals, validations, reconciliations, or reviews happen today? Fourth is handoff points. Where does responsibility move from one team, system, or role to another? If you cannot map those 4 things clearly, you're not ready to automate. And by the way, this is where a lot of agent projects go wrong. Teams think they're automating a task, but they're usually automating a chain of assumptions. So part 2 is fix the data before you give the agent access to it. And this sounds boring, which is exactly why teams postpone it. But weak data discipline is one of the fastest ways to make an agent deployment trustworthy. Ask yourself, what is the source of truth? Which system wins if 2 systems disagree? What schema is the agent expected to read from? What schema is it allowed to write to? What validation happens before new records are created or changed? If those answers are fuzzy, your agent will not magically create clean operations. It will create confident confusion at scale. And this matters for more than data quality. It matters for auditability. It matters for reporting integrity. It matters for incident response. It matters for compliance evidence, because the moment someone asks, why did this record change, or where did this output come from, or who approved this action, you need an answer that's better than the agent handled it. That is not evidence. That is a red flag. So before automation, define your data ownership, define your validation logic, define your retention expectations, and define what the agent is not allowed to alter. If the data model is unstable, the automation is unstable. So part 3 is do not confuse a tool call with a controlled workflow. Just because an agent can send an email, or update a ticket, summarize a case, or call an API does not mean it should own the full process around that action. This is one of the most common design mistakes. Teams wrap an entire business process inside agent logic and hope that the model will execute it consistently every time. That is not a workflow, that's a wish. A better model is this. Let the deterministic system own the rails. Let the agent operate within the rails. So in other words, triggers, approvals, and system of record updates and policy checks should be hardwired wherever possible. Then let the agent do what it's actually good at: drafting, classifying, summarizing, extracting, comparing, or generating options inside control boundaries. This is a security and audit issue because repeatability matters. If the process has to happen the same way every time, that consistency should not depend on whether the model interprets the situation correctly on a given day. So part 4 is build observability from day one, not later. You need to be able to answer basic questions. What did the agent do? What input did it receive? What tools did it call? What data did it touch? What output did it generate? What approval, if any, happened before the action completed? And what evidence was preserved? If your team cannot answer those questions quickly, you're going to struggle in 3 places immediately. 1 is production troubleshooting. 2, audit and compliance review. And 3 is incident investigation. And this is where teams make another big mistake. They rely on agent self-reporting. They ask the agent whether it completed the task successfully. That's not independent verification. That's like asking the process to audit itself. Instead, you want logs, traces, system events, workflow state changes, approval records, and measurable success criteria outside the model itself. The rule here is simple. If a control matters, the evidence for that control should not live only in the agent's narrative about what happened. So part 5, scope authority deliberately. This might be the most important one. Too many teams grant broad access because it helps, the demo go faster. The agent can read everything, write anywhere, trigger actions freely, bypass permissions, use a shared credential. And for a few days, it looks incredibly productive. Then the reality shows up. Least privilege still matters. Segregation of duties still matters. Approval boundaries still matter. Sensitive actions still need tighter controls than low-risk actions. So before deployment, define what the agent can read, what the agent can write, what requires human approval, what is completely out of bounds, which credentials are used, how those credentials are monitored, how authority changes over time. Do not design agent access around convenience. Design it around blast radius, because if an agent has more authority than the business process actually requires, the control failure is not accidental, it's architectural. So here is the full control review in one line. Map the real process, fix the data, separate workflows from tool calls, design observability, scope authority deliberately. That is the review. And if you do those 5 things before automation, you dramatically improve your odds of building something that is not just fast, but trustworthy, because that is the goal. Not a flashy pilot, not a week 1 demo, a system that still holds up when audit asks questions, when security investigates an issue, and when the business depends on it at scale.